Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I'm doing my best Lisa Klein impression here. Uh, so, as the time has moved on and web-based systems have proliferated over the last 10 or 15 years, there are a lot of options available for how to run your regatta, doing registrations and such. The days of coming and filling that CVYRA form out that we used to do and collect checks, I mean, that's pretty much, the thing of the past. So over the last, I don't know, 5, 8, 10 years, or I can't remember how long, we've had a system at SSA that we've been able to use, but there are many other systems out there, and clearly many classes use different things, different systems. But so I think where we're finally coming as a club is that you really can use any system of your choice to do registration for your regatta. Each one comes with pros and cons, and there's really no one size fits all. Whatever works for how you typically run things for your fleet. And a lot of that has to do with class culture and that kind of thing. For example, we still have some snipe fleets up in Boston that don't do any electronic registration. You show up and you sign a form and you write a check, and it's like Back to the Future in 1980. But most classes have a system that they're typically using that they like, and their members are used to using. So I think that's really up to every fleet doing an invitational regatta to decide on which system they want to use. And so I'm going to go through some examples of both our internal system, which is known as RecHub, which most people have interacted with on some level. But then there are other systems like ClubSpot that we use for the snipe class, and the lasers are using it. Regatta Network's pretty popular, yacht scoring. And frankly, you could use even a homegrown system, like if you had a Square account, you could set up your Square website and accept registrations and credit cards, Google Form. I mean, there's a lot of other ways you could do that. And then, as I said, you could even do it old school and just have people write checks when they show up in the morning. That's really up to you. So I just wanted to go over these pros and cons on these different systems, because they do have some significant impacts both in process and cost, and you have to sort of weigh those pluses and minuses how you want to do it. Other considerations you might think about that come in here is, if you're doing a sort of a bigger regatta and you're selling t-shirts or swag or stuff like that, selling that in other systems may be easier. We have done that kind of thing in RecHub, but it's it's not the easiest thing to do, and it ends up being a little dirty in terms of finances and that kind of stuff. So I'll go through both the pluses and minuses of using SSA's internal system and then these external systems. Okay, so internal systems, RecHub. There are a couple of, so these are sort of pros and cons listed here. If it's especially a good system to use if you need to know who's an SSA member. So for example, I don't know who does this. I mean, typically in the snipe, we just charge the same price for everybody. But you might, depending on what you offer, you might want to have a differentiated pricing structure where members pay less or nothing, and then visitors pay more, similar to what we do in the club regattas. It's just depending on what you're offering. The nice thing about the internal system is that you have to log in so it knows who's a member. So it deals with all of that, just by virtue of the way it's set up, and it knows who members are. If you're using it to register people and accept credit card transactions, SSA absorbs all of the transaction fees. So typically, credit card transaction fees are a little less than 3%, 2.5, something like that. And then a platform fee, which we pay by virtue of haven't contracted with RecHub for our club management site. That's probably more appropriate for the external systems, but the big thing is it's cheaper. It's generally this is the cheapest option available. One of the things that we always have to do after an invitational is we have to report to SSA, how many members, non-members, because non-members have to pay a certain fee for a weekend regatta, based on what fleet it is. And so if it's done in RecHub, Kathy has access to all of that. So generally she can know who's a member, who's not a member, because they've logged in. It's pretty straightforward. It's not too much to do on the fleet side. All events are put on the SSA calendar, but if you're using RecHub to register, the events on the calendar, you click register. It's kind of one-stop shopping. You don't have to sort of view the calendar thing and then go someplace else. So that's a little bit easier. One of the downsides, or it's not really a downside, but it's just a question of who has to do it, is the event needs to be properly configured in RecHub if you're going to do registration there. So for example, we need, the admins on the SSA side, typically that's me or Lisa or maybe Kathy. A bunch of us can do that. We have to set the pricing and get that all set up. Get your information in there, notice of race, SIs, if you're using something different. It's just a bunch of administration that has to be coordinated with SSA. As many people are aware, registration can be a little clunky, especially for non-members. This issue of, the question of how many crew and that kind of stuff, it's a little weird. And, there are reasons that we've done it that way to keep long-term maintenance of RecHub from being a maintenance nightmare. Having 50 different questionnaires for 50 different regattas, just the way that was set up in the prior system got to be a little unmanageable. So it is a little clunky. And in terms of scoring, that's always a question of how that's going to happen. If we register, if you use your RecHub for your regatta registration, that information will be exported and put into JavaScore and scored in the same way that we've been doing it for many years. And then that gets scored typically by an SSA or a race committee person who knows how to do that. And that's a pretty well-known process. One of the couple of the downsides there is, on the water scoring, we have been trying to do that with JavaScore, and we kind of know how to do it, but it requires some effort and some expertise that may not be available on every race committee on any particular weekend. So that's always a question. So typically scoring is done at the end of the day, back in the club office, and then you click the button, it goes up on the results website. And then ultimately, the kinds of coordination has to happen with SSA. And I hinted at this earlier. You have to, explain what are the events, the event details, description, the cost, unique documents, that kind of thing. And then you have to report the non-members, again, if it's not obvious, the SSA within 7 days, so that Kathy can figure out what the net funds due back to you are. And when that's all done, SSA will transfer the net funds back to you. So that's basically all of the registration costs, the registration fees, minus the visiting boats per the schedule of fees, and then the net goes back to whatever fleet is running the regatta. And that's a process I think that everybody's pretty familiar with. Okay, so I think kind of what's becoming, more prominent these days for invitationals is using an external system. And as I mentioned, many national class organizations have a preferred system that members know. So for example, for the snipe class, that's ClubSpot. We have our national website is in ClubSpot, and the lasers are doing the same thing. And one of the nice things about that is for example, ClubSpot can be set up to verify and require that you paid your national dues. So we use that in Snipe a lot, and that way it just removes that extra layer of overhead of having to go around and check everybody's class membership, and then disqualify them if they haven't paid it. They can't even register without being a class member. So that's a real benefit of using a system like that. But of course, just sort of depends on what your class does. One of the downsides is that many of these systems have associated fees, and both the transaction fees from the credit cards and often a platform fee per registration. That's the way ClubSpot does it. I'm not sure about Regatta Network. I know yacht scoring is typically a flat fee of like $10 a boat kind of thing, but depending on the cost of your regatta, it might be as high as 10% of the registration fee. So, that's something you have to really build into your P&L for the regatta. As far as configuration of these external systems, obviously that's on the fleet to do and set up. But typically, if you're using an external system like that, you know it well, and it's something that you can do pretty easily because you've done it before and you know it well. The fleet's responsible for all post-regatta reporting to SSA. So, for example, if you've got a number of non-SSA boats, you need to report that to Kathy and essentially pay the club for the scheduled fees for that number of boats. So that is, all falls onto the fleet. But on the plus side, again, registration can be smoother, and you can customize it, especially if you know the system and it does what you want. You can customize it in a way that people are really familiar with. You control the net funds because it's in a system that you control. So all of that money comes to you. But the downside is that then you have to, the burden on paying SSA, their cut is on you also. Scoring for most of these platforms is done in the platform. That's one of their value adds that they provide, is some sort of online scoring. And that's great. And depending on who's on the race committee, they may or may not know whatever system you're using. So if they don't know it, typically what ends up happening is some member of the fleet, whether they're sailing or not sailing, ends up having to do the scoring. I know some, I've asked Steve to do scoring for Snipe stuff in ClubSpot, and he's been willing to do that because he knows it pretty well. And I think people are getting to know ClubSpot pretty well, so we're having more people to do that. So Scott, you had a question?
Yeah, so you don't have to use the scoring in ClubSpot. You can do it on JavaScore. You just
So I was actually gonna get to that in a sec. That's a sort of a perturbation that that's possible. Yeah, so I'll address that in just a sec. So then with coordination with SSA, similar to last time, the only thing SSA really needs, because we do all of the creation of the events in the SSA calendar, we just need a link to, so if you have an invitational, you're going to do it in Regatta Network or ClubSpot, you just have to give us the link, put the link in there and saying, Regatta registration is on ClubSpot, here's the link. Go forth and register. So that's pretty simple. There's not much administration on the SSA side. You have to give, if you want some unique wording in the event, that you have to provide that too. So this is getting to the thing that Scott just mentioned. So if for example, you wanted to use ClubSpot Regatta Network, scoring, but you wanted to use JavaScore to score it, you'd have to provide a list of entrants, names, sale numbers, preferably in an Excel spreadsheet, so that it could be then imported into JavaScore. And this is just my opinion, but I don't know why you would want to pay all of the platform fees of a system like ClubSpot if you're not going to use their scoring. I mean, that to me is like one of the huge value adds to using that platform. But again, that's just my opinion. One of the things with scoring is that online is that, with these online platforms, score is done and then it's boom, it's online immediately. So, people, if they have phones on the boat and, this scored on the water on a phone or a laptop or something, they can look at the results, even between races, I guess, if it's done, if it's scored.
Or if the class association is following, they can.
Yeah, or whoever, it's not, you don't have to wait till the end of the day till somebody gets back to the office, does the thing, uploads it. Post regatta reporting to membership, I think within 30 days is reasonable. So that gives you, and by post regatta reporting, I mean, paying SSA for their cut of the non-members. And I think 30 days is reasonable. I made that number up, but typically the payouts from these systems happen on some sort of schedule, and this gives the opportunity for the system to pay you out. Then you write a check to SSA. I don't think it's fair to say you have to do it within a week because you may not have the money. But I guess that's up for discussion at some point. And then the last thing is, if you're using an external system, those results are in that external system, and the question is, if you want them archived on results.severansailing.org, you have to make those available. And typically what I like to do is, the easiest thing is just to print the results to a PDF, and then we'll just link them on the results site. If you don't care about it, then you don't care about it. You don't even have to do it. That's sort of like one of my bugaboos is, at least for the snipes, is I really like to have that archival site. So 10 years later, when I'm thinking, yeah, how did so-and-so do in that regatta 10 years ago? I know where I can go to get that. If you don't care, then you don't have to do that. But if you do care, that's another step you have to do. Okay, so that I think covers sort of the pros and cons of different systems. And again, SSA may have an opinion on which way they'd like the best, but I think ultimately that's up to fleets to do what works best for them.
Yep. And we also have back on
Turn
the
back over to Lisa.
well, no, this is part your stuff too. Back on the that form. So this is the event setup questionnaire we put together.
Right. So that's yeah, I don't know how to go through it, but all of the pieces of information that I mentioned that you need to communicate to SSA can now be communicated through this form. And so I didn't realize the form was broken into two, but that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So basically the regatta setup, so depending on what you're going to do, if you're going to set it up in RecHub, you end up having to do more. If you're going to set it up
on the form.
Yeah, on the form here. If you're going to set it up an external system, obviously you have to convey less information. So it's much more quick. Anyway, so I think that's a good way to convey that information, rather than just having to make calls and emails, and because that stuff sometimes can get lost. So I think that's a really nice way to do it.
And it after you complete the form, and there's more to it, you should probably go through the rest of it. That gets emailed to Kathy so that Kathy can make sure that it's set up properly on our calendar.
Yeah. Okay. Back to you. Any questions before we move on to the next subject? Oh yeah, go ahead, Scott.
Oh, well, I guess I don't know if I have any real questions, but yeah, thanks for pointing out these forms. I didn't realize they were there. Thanks.
Well, they're all really
brand new.
Yep, brand new.
Unveiled.
Oh, brand new.
So
yeah, I mean, I think this whole effort of sort of thinking through this in a more formal way, made everybody realize, oh, geez, we need a way to convey this information that's done in it's not just sort of ad hoc email.
Yeah, and thanks to Kathy. This is Kathy's, was able to set it up online with a link to the website, do the online form. So.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mary Pat. You had a question?
Oh, I think you answered. I was just going to ask if these forms are live, but it sounds like they are.
They are. Yeah, we just have to send the links around or make them available.
It looks good. Thank you.
Barbara?
I love the forms. That's such a great idea. Brilliant. Can you clarify whether it's 7 days or 30? I believe
Yeah, so,
on the last one and the slide before said 7. Just for
right, so in the
clarification.
case of using an external, an internal registration, using Reco, in general,
Here's your money already.
SSA already has your money. And in most cases, it's pretty obvious who's a member, who's not a member. So I think for the most part, Kathy can figure that out. But you know, basically within a week, you just work with Kathy to make sure everybody's on the same page there. And, you know, I think that can be done quickly because SSA already has the money. You don't have to transfer anything. It's just more of like, yeah, okay, we think we had 12 out of town votes and just everybody's on the same page. It's a longer period in an external system because, you know, again, it may take Club Spot a month, depending on when they pay you out. And, you know, so it depends on how much money fleets have. If you've got a buffer, you can just take care of it that week. But if you're waiting for the system to pay you out, because that's the money that you have, you gotta wait.
Kathy, do you have any comments on that? Are you kind of in agreement with those timeframes?
Yeah, I just made those.
Just made 'em up.
I think they seem reasonable to me.
Yeah, I mean, the problem, the one other issue is it can take sometimes up to a couple weeks to get the check approved because it goes through 2 approvals. So if you are in a hurry for your funds, you'll want to send me the stuff right away and so that I can get it rolling. The other thing though is for events running through Rec Hub, if you are tight on funds, we are happy to front the money. So for example, if you have to give Martin and Angel a deposit for an event or a caterer, whatever it is, we can do that and then just deduct it at the end so that you're not having to float funds that the fleet doesn't have.
Ah, okay, that's nice. Yeah,
Yeah, that's good
another
to know.
benefit.
Anything else that you can think of, Kathy?
I don't think so unless someone has any questions.